by Wendell Berry, who was a great agriculturally inspired poet of the Great Plains. And this is called Manifesto, the Mad Farmer Liberation Front. Love the quick profit, the annual raise, vacation with pay. Want more of everything ready-made. Be afraid to know your neighbors and to die, and you will have a window in your head. Not even your future will be a mystery anymore. Your mind will be punched in a card and shut away in a little drawer. When they want you to buy something, they will call you. When they want you to die for profit, they will let you know. So friends, every day do something that won't compute. Love the Lord, love the world, work for nothing. Take all that you have and be poor. Love someone who does not deserve it. Denounce the government and embrace the flag. Hope to live in that free republic for which it stands. Give your approval to all you cannot understand. Praise ignorance for what man has not encountered, he has not destroyed. Ask the questions that have no answers. Invest in the millennium. Plant sequoias. Say that your main crop is the forest that you did not plant, that you will not live to harvest. Say that the leaves are harvested when they have rotted into the mold. Call that profit. Prophecy such returns. Put your faith in the 2 inches of humus that will build under the trees every 1,000 years. Listen to carrion. Put your ear close and hear the faint chattering of the songs that are to come. Expect the end of the world. Laugh. Laughter is immeasurable. Be joyful, though you have considered all the facts. So long as women do not go cheap for power, please women more than men. Ask yourself, will this satisfy a woman satisfied to bear a child? Will this disturb the sleep of a woman near to giving birth? Go with your love to the fields. Lie easy in the shade. Rest your head in her lap. Swear allegiance to what is nighest to your thoughts. As soon as the generals and the politicos can predict the motions of your mind, lose it. Leave it as a sign to mark the false trail, the way you didn't go. Be like the fox who makes more tracks than necessary, some in the wrong direction. Practice resurrection. All right, so now I want to introduce you to Sarah Vogel. I'm sure many of you know her name, know of her. She is a longtime lawyer. She's an advocate. She's a 2-term ag commissioner for North Dakota. She's a North Dakotan. She's lived many places, and she is a warm and wonderful human being who has written a fantastic book. If you haven't picked it up, The Farmer's Lawyer, I'm about a third into it. And as I was telling her earlier, nonfiction isn't usually my jam, but she makes this read like the most amazing adventure story, and it's a wonderful book and a great story, and I am grateful to her for being here with us today. So with that, I will introduce you to Sarah Vogel. Sarah, take it away.
Hi, everybody, and it's great being here and with the Zoom. I don't know, I think a lot of people here are aware that my parents were longtime members, some of the earlier people who founded this congregation many years ago. And this was their home away from home. And then they moved to Grand Forks, but still the Bismarck UU was their church. And so I have really fond memories of the UU, and it's a treat. It really is a treat to be here. And of course, you all are the go-to people for any social justice cause. And in the thick of it on everything, and certainly for social justice for family farmers. I would like to talk just a little bit about why I wrote the book. And while I was doing this case, I think I dimly recognized how important it was and the context in which it fit, and that it was historic. And I remember thinking from time to time, I should be writing a diary. I should be writing a diary, but I didn't have time to write a diary. I could barely get groceries, so, but what I did do then is I saved every scrap of paper. I saved all the phone messages that came in. I saved all the budgets from the farmers. I saved their letters to me and my letters to them. I sometimes I can't find something I'm looking for, but more or less I put it into boxes and I stashed them. And the case went on, and the case, morphed out into like many boxes of paper. And they migrated, after the case was done, those boxes migrated into a back room, my attic. And at some point, I was remodeling my second floor and I had to empty out the attic. And at that juncture, I had to decide, what am I going to do with all these papers? And right at that moment, a historian just sort of randomly knocked on the door and said, he was going through town. Actually, it was kind of interesting. He was researching communists up at Bowbells, North Dakota. Who would have thought? There were quite a few communist cells up there. Must have been a lot of Icelanders or something like that. And so I told him, I said, I've got this problem with all these papers. And he said, you cannot throw them away. That's history. And he said, call the archivist over at the North Dakota Heritage Center. So I did. And really within half an hour, the archivist was there, saw those boxes, got all excited, came back with a pickup and my problem with the attic and the storage of all these papers. So they went into the archives as the Sarah Vogel collection. And it's confidential. It still is confidential because I still have to go through and, because I've got stuff. I've got bank account numbers and social security numbers, you name it. But that's one of the random things that happened that enabled me to write this book, because I knew it was important. I knew it was historic, but I saved the papers. And then I added more papers when I was an assistant attorney general. I added more when I was agriculture commissioner. And then I've even added more since I've been practicing law after '89 in other historic cases. But the theme of my law practice, I think, has been representing farmers since I moved back to North Dakota. Prior to that, I was mostly a consumer protection lawyer. And there's a link between protecting consumers struggling with credit cards and farmers struggling with USDA. I used to joke, all you have to really do is add 3 zeros to every consumer problem. Instead of $100 problem, farmers have $100,000 problem and so on, but the issues are the same. And so I was able to take some of my consumer protection experience and apply it in the farm sector. The story in the book is about my first case, the most important case I think I've done ever. And it's called Coleman versus Block. It started really, and I tell the story in the book, but it started when I heard from one farmer. Well, actually, let me take it back. It was when I was doing consumer protection work and I was in charge of enforcing the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. And we had jurisdiction at the Federal Trade Commission over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of creditors. And the goal was to stop sex discrimination, until about 1976, it was legal, at least not illegal, for creditors to discriminate on the basis of gender and marital status and religion or whatever. And the Equal Credit Opportunity Act stopped all that. And I was there at the beginning of the law and enforcing it. And that's when I first bumped up against the Farmers Home Administration, because of all of the creditors that we had jurisdiction over nationwide, they were the worst. And I get a huge kick out of things today, as you know, the black farmer cases, the Native American cases, one of which I worked on for 20 years, women's discrimination. I mean, it's still in the news. And it's ended up costing billions of dollars to the federal treasury, because this particular agency was so bad. It had gone. Anyway, so when I returned to North Dakota, I started hearing from many, many farmers who are dealing with this agency called the Farmers Home Administration. And that's the same one that had been discriminating on the basis of race and gender. And so, and then because, you know, I mentioned at the beginning that my parents were members of the Unitarian Church here in Bismarck, but that was not my father's real religion. My father's real religion was the Nonpartisan League of North Dakota. So that's the religion in which I was raised, not Unitarian, but certainly the Nonpartisan League. So when I started hearing from farmers about how they'd been abused by this agency called the Farmers Home Administration, it set me off on a course that I almost had no choice about, because first of all, at this point, I hated the Farmers Home Administration because of the race and sex discrimination. And then the second part was that they were foreclosing and treating family farmers very unfairly, which was the antithesis of why that agency had been set up to do business in the first place. So a whole lot of buttons in my character, in my history, had gotten pushed. And so I started off on this case. And at first I thought, we'll just bring these flaws in their operation, illegalities, to the attention of the Farmers Home Administration, and they'll fix it. Well, they didn't. It was the Reagan administration. It was David Stockman. They didn't like lending to farmers. They thought farmers should just operate on their own. The federal government had no business helping family farmers. Actually, I think they were more for corporate agribusiness and so on. So it ended up as a lawsuit. All my hopes that it would be settled, you know, that they would say, oh gosh, we're sorry. That didn't happen. So at some point along the way, I realized that I had to go forward, and a lot of it was being a nonpartisan leaguer from North Dakota, that this was something I just had to do. So I had tons of support. I see Marnie is nodding. The North Dakota Department of Agriculture was very helpful. Kent Jones, your mom, they help with a lot. Jeff Weissmanning, they help with a lot of data and studies and information and support. You know, and sometimes I thought I was crazy, you know, my farmers and I thought, you know, but people came along and were very supportive, and amongst them, the North Dakota Department of Agriculture. So eventually it was obvious that the Reagan administration wasn't going to change their ways. And eventually I decided to file a lawsuit, and eventually figured out that it would have to be a class action, which a class action is a legal methodology that certain people called named plaintiffs, class representatives, can represent the class. They're illustrative of hundreds, thousands of other people, too numerous to be named in the caption of the case, are also protected by the lawsuit. It's a great legal remedy. And of course, it's under constant attack by corporate America. So if you ever see a chance to support class actions, do so. And it ended up as a North Dakota class action. And we were very, very fortunate to have, well, it wasn't just fortune, it was like deliberate, that we picked Judge Van Sickle, Judge Bruce M. Van Sickle, who many of you would have known. Judge Van Sickle was the right judge because he had compassion. He was also brave. He'd been in World War II as a Marine captain, many battles. He was, he'd grown up on a farm by Minot. He'd been poor. He was war hero, Republican legislator at one point, and became a federal judge. And my father told me he was the judge we needed. So by that point, I'd lost my own house in Bismarck, and I'd moved to Grand Forks, and I was living in my parents' basement. My dad said that if I wanted to file this case, and I did, I had to do it back in Bismarck, which was 280 miles away. I had just lost my house and office and you name it. So we filed with Judge Van Sickle, and that certainly was the right choice because he was a very compassionate, wise, learned man, and not afraid to go up against a Republican administration. And I think everybody in this room too, well, I guess in this Zoom room, would be aware of the ARC case that was also Judge Van Sickle's case. And that was another class action, a North Dakota class action on behalf of all of the people who are incarcerated by the state of North Dakota under inhumane conditions because of developmental disabilities and so on. And so Judge Van Sickle had these two massive, important class action cases. And so learning about class actions and learning about how to do this, and I'm not going to give the whole plot away, but people came forward. It was amazing. I mean, like I started, and then the farmers were very supportive. I would get depressed, ready to quit, and somebody would show up and, like help me reconnect my phone or stave off the foreclosure on my own house, or my father gave me a job. And, so it was a lot of sort of almost miraculous things that were happening during the case. And other lawyers came to support us. And anyway, we ended up going to court. It ended up becoming a national class action. And it was it ended up as a very, very big deal. At the time that the national class was certified, I think there were, now I'm going to forget, but it's in the book. There were many thousands of foreclosure cases pending across the country. I think it was 14,000. And Judge Van Sickle told his clerk of court to write to all of the other judges, all of the other courts throughout the nation, and say, if you want to send those cases to us, we'll take them. And stopped like that tens of thousands of foreclosures. So USDA, and they were kicking and screaming. They hated the idea of a little judge from a little state telling them what to do, but that's our judicial system. And and they appealed, but on the day the appeal their brief was due, they quit. And so it became final and permanent. And they tried to get around it by changing the law, changing the regs. But at that point, Congress was wise to them And anyway, it ended up culminating in the late 80s by a national law that basically reordered the whole way USDA did business and incorporated what it called the Coleman Reforms, which put constitutional law protections in place for family farmers around the United States. And nowadays, like if a farmer has a dispute with USDA on any subject, they're able to get a neutral hearing officer and have a fair hearing and have notice and so on. And I'm proud that those are called the Coleman Reforms. So it was like a little case with a great big impact. And anyway, throughout my legal career, and I was pretty busy for a long time doing a lot of cases and being in office. In the back of my mind, I kept thinking someday a historian is going to come and write a book about that, and I'll share my papers with that historian. But the historian never came. And by the time I was 65, I said, I guess I have to write that case. So I had to move my way out of full-time practice of law, or try to. It didn't work out quite like that, because I had another case at that point pending on behalf of Native Americans called Keep Siegel versus Vilsack. And that case lasted seriously 19 years and 9 months until it settled only a few years ago, until it wrapped up only a few years ago. But anyway, I more or less stopped doing everything but that and volunteer work about when I was about 65, sort of quote retired, and then started working on the book, which was, you know, a massive undertaking. It took me years and years to pull the papers together, to get the papers organized, to be able to find things. And then I think it was about 4 years ago that I actually started to write the book and turned it in a year ago. And this coming Tuesday, I'm going to have like about half hour, maybe an hour with Audible, because I'm going to have read my own book. And everybody on this Zoom will get a kick out of it, because the reason why I'm reading the Audible book is because the reader that they had couldn't pronounce so many North Dakota words. So it would, if people have listened to the Audible, you would have noticed they say, instead of slew, they called it slough, like the blackbirds flying over the slough. And Medina was Medina, and they murdered Fleischkekla, or she murdered Fleischkekla and couldn't pronounce Kuchen. And then some others were just ridiculous, like Minneapolis, as though it were Indianapolis. I'm seeing nods, because I think maybe some of you did listen to the Audible, but it will be replaced, and I will read it. I will be reading it, and I will not, I might not be the best reader, but I will not mispronounce so many words. So I hope you guys enjoy the book. I tried to write it as a legal thriller. I am a huge fan of John Grisham and many other legal thriller novels and real life stories. So if, because I thought it was exciting, it was dramatic, and if I could make it like that, I wanted it to be a book for general readers, not just farmers, not just lawyers. But one of my main empathy was because I could sense another farm crisis coming. You know, you see little hints of overextension of credit, too much borrowing, farmers not having not able to achieve in the market full, get a profit from the market and being propped up by farm program payments. So I could feel this happening, and I wanted to have my book out before that happened, because I don't want to see that again. I think it is essential that the United States base its rural economy, base its whole economy on family farm agriculture. And I think there's tons of economic data to show that that's the best way for the health of the people, the health of the economy, the health of the nation, the health of our society. So I wanted to write my book to help that along. And I think it is a very timely book. And I hope it makes a difference.
Every woman in the world dreamed a sweet dream of peace. Every woman of every nation, young and old, each generation, held their hands out in the name of love. There would be no more. Every man in the world had his mind set on freedom. Every brother stood with brother as a witness for peace. Every man of every nation, young and old, each generation, held his hands out in the name of love, there would be no more. Every leader in the world shared a vision of freedom. Every leader in the world shared a sweet dream of peace. Every leader of every nation worked for justice and liberation, holding hands out in the name of love, there would be no more. Every nation in the world set a true course for freedom. Every nation raises children in a culture of peace. All our sons and all our daughters reach their